I know we've talked about being focused on one asset class. There's no harm diversifying in the beginning to explore. Then you realize that this is not my cup of tea, and that was the mistake I made. I went unit trust, I went properties, then I went into stocks thinking I could get quick money, and I got burned really nicely. Then I realized, okay, time to go on a diet, which was the next phase. Time to go on a diet, and then time to know also realization that my gosh, if you don't focus, you're everywhere. You're everywhere. You are like literally the jack of all trades but the master of none. And I wasn't really.
Before we begin the podcast, have you gotten your free ebook? It's called the Build a Six-Figure Portfolio Guidebook. Now, inside it, we share with you the tips and tricks to bring your stock investing skills to the next level. The best part, it's only 10 pages long and it's totally free. Whether you're on Spotify or YouTube, the link to download is in the description, or you can go to www.firl.co/FREE or www.firl.co/free. Welcome back to the FIRL podcast. Now, today we will be talking about the phases that pretty much every investor goes through step by step, and really what you experience, some of the obstacles you have, and what are some of the how do you overcome those obstacles?
Correct.
Right? And everyone goes through this phase. Each of us manage it in different ways.
That's right.
But if you're listening and you just started out or you've not even started, then I think this podcast is perfect for you. And no, actually it's perfect for everyone, right?
Yeah.
Because everyone is in a particular phase of their investing life.
Somewhere, somehow, one phase will relate somehow or rather to you.
Absolutely, right? And we're going to show you, partially our story of how we overcame these obstacles, how we moved on from these phases, and hopefully you can get a few tips and tricks to do it faster than us.
Yeah.
Right. So I think when it comes to the first phase of every investor is the motivation. Right? The motivation to start. Right? So before I go into my motivation, what was yours?
I think growing up in a family where I had classmates that had more wealthier parents was probably one of the earlier motivations.
Right.
But I think the second motivation was that when I started, when I got married and I started having children, I think that was an even bigger motivation for me.
So let's start with the first one, right? Like, so when you see other your neighbors, right?
My classmates actually.
Your classmate, right? Because you went to a school that was very elite.
Yeah.
But maybe the background you came from, the matching wasn't quite there, right?
Correct.
In terms of and probably because your dad was like a teacher.
Yeah.
And so he had the connection, so he managed to get you inside. And so walk me through, like, why was that motivating? Like is it because you want their lifestyle, or is it something else?
It was probably, okay, part of it probably was wanting their lifestyle. Part of it was probably also curious. I've always had this curious mindset ever since I was young. And it was like a lot of questions always pop up. It's like I had this friend, too bad we've not really kept in touch. He's actually Indonesian by birth. He's actually born in Malaysia, but to Indonesian, father was Indonesian, mother was a Malaysian. And every year, because the parents were not around, the parents were in Jakarta, and he stayed with his grandfather in Kuching. And, but every year, at the end of the year, the father will actually bring them to the States for a holiday. So every year they will come back. He will come back with gifts, and I knew them quite well in school because we were both in the Scouts. His elder brother was also in the Scouts, but I kept on trying to find out what was the connection or how they as a family could afford that kind of lifestyle, and implored why my family couldn't have it. My parents couldn't have it. And I think that was more out of like the desire to want that kind of lifestyle.
Right.
And the desire to have options. And then the second phase in that, when it was in school, was that I was not left with many options when I finished my SPM. All my friends were like, the day you finish the last paper and then tomorrow you're into Concord College in Imperial.
Right.
They were like going everywhere.
But you had to do local, right?
Yeah,
so that gap,
there was the gap. And I was like, why am I limiting? Why am I limited with this kind of choices?
Yeah, I mean, these people, they're not any smarter, they're not any like better than you. Maybe some of them maybe are, but the gap in terms of merit is not that much bigger, and yet they get to travel very far. They get to have holidays every year, or more often, not just once a year. But you felt that like you didn't quite understand why there was such a gap.
That's right.
And one of the things I realized about, because your story in this sense is not uncommon, and one thing that I hear a lot is actually this idea that they have certain assumptions about money.
That's right.
When you are at the level of when you see rich people, like when you mix around rich people, but you're not.
Yeah.
So did you have to like sidestep or overcome that in order for you to then say, okay, now I think I give myself the right to be rich or something like that?
I think not so much the right to be rich, but I think that book that I've mentioned in earlier podcasts and some of the earlier videos about Rich Dad Poor Dad was really that eye-opening thing about understanding a relationship with money and understanding how wealth is not in direct correlation to just like go to school, study hard, get a good job and all that. That equation was, I think, the first piece to understanding all that. Yeah. And only then I felt that, hey, it's not evil to want to be rich.
How come it's not evil? I thought money is the root of all evil, John.
Money is just an amplifier.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. And if you're an asshole and you have money, so it's asshole multiplied by the wealth.
Squared.
Yeah, it's squared. But if you're a kind-hearted person, and money is just a utility or a multiplier or whatever you are. And I think that was something of a realization for me too, because I used to, quite sad and quite naive, that I used to think that all rich people were unscrupulous.
Yeah,
they had to be
like Scrooge McDuck.
ducks, and they had to scam in order to be wealthy. And yeah, there was a fear that I had to overcome, and then only then I could say, oh, I deserve to be rich if I knew how, if I know the rules of the game, and if I improve myself, that was it. Before my story, right?
Yeah. So then you also mentioned like your kids, right? That was like a big one.
Yeah.
Is it because of today we have like a very hefty education bill when we send out, if you have kids, education is definitely top of mind.
Yeah.
Not just like university, I mean like from
preschool
or, what the Americans say, K to 12, right?
Yeah.
So it's kindergarten, 12 is grade 12, or in Malaysia's case, Form 5, or what you call it, the O-levels.
O-levels.
Yeah. So is that the big reason, or there are like other?
That is one. But the other thing is that the benefit I had was that I came from a family of teachers. And I know the amount of dedication and love and passion for you to be a good teacher. I mean, I've seen that in my parents and my sister. What I felt was a disconnect in between, ironically, where the education system in Malaysia is headed right now, and the kind of quality of teachers that it's not to say they're not smart or anything, but the love they have for their profession.
Right.
And I was very, 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 very beneficial because I benefited from going to one of the top schools in Sarawak at that time. It was a LaSalle school. Discipline was through the roof, all boys school. And I benefited a lot in my childhood days. And I knew that formation of character was important for my children. But the sad reality is that you cannot let things to chance today. And I think that's a very big worry for a lot of parents today.
Yeah.
You cannot leave it to chance, because so happen that if you send your kids to a school that may not have this kind of environment, then you know that your kids are already at a disadvantage because you knew what it took.
You need some molding.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah, and then you raise a good point because if you're someone who believes that you can leave things to chance, especially when it comes to your children.
Yeah.
Okay. Then my question to you is, how many times have you asked them to say thank you?
Oh, yeah.
Right? If you want to leave things to chance, why do you need to keep asking them to say thank you? Right? If they're naturally grateful people, and if they're already thankful, you don't need to tell them, hey, say thank you.
Correct.
Right? The fact you have to do it means that there's some shaping involved.
There must be a rigor. There must be some kind of sandbox. And to the point about children being my second motivator was because come back to the first point I made about my friends leaving for overseas education when I never had that kind of opportunity. I don't want to deprive. I'm not saying that I will force them to go overseas. If my kids are dumb, I'm not going to spend that kind of money.
Yeah, definitely.
But
it also depends on what they're studying.
Correct. And I'll be very practical about it, but I do not want to leave it to chance to say that if she was bright,
that's right,
and then she was denied the opportunity purely because of financial reasons, I don't want that reason to exist in a way. So that was the probably another motivating factor why I embarked on this path. And I think thirdly was because it goes back to my days of being curious. I was just curious about things, curious that how this knowledge can be applied. And then all of a sudden, oh, crap. Because of curiosity, I could marry it with math, logic, and economics and all these things.
Engineering background.
And said, hey, investing kind of fit the bill. So, yeah. What about you, MJ?
So for me, I wouldn't say that I thought money was evil. I come from a background that is, I would say, above average in terms of privilege. And so, obviously, I could see the benefits of money, from a very young age. But one thing that really, I would say motivated me was that I actually received very little allowance when I was young.
Good.
And I was not allowed to use a single cent of my ang pao money, which, if you listen to previous podcasts, is by the time I was 20, it was 20,000. So every year I'll get 1,000 basically. And my mom would say, no, I'm not allowed to use it. So, I already knew, I guess there's an inbuilt sense of, like learning how to save money and delay gratification. Just to give you a sense, when I was, so this was like maybe 20 years ago when I just started primary school.
Okay.
And I was getting like 50 cents a month.
I think you had a term for it, MJ. I really love that term. Poverty simulation.
Yeah, it's like poverty simulation. And so basically, I was really smart about it. I would go to different cliques and borrow 20 cents each. So obviously I didn't survive on 50 alone.
Yeah.
I think there's a pros and cons to that, right? I think the first one is obviously, like you say, poverty simulation or that. But I think there needs to be a proper calibration. And what I mean by that is, yes, the number should not be very high, the allowance you give to your children, but it should be high enough that they have to make trade-offs. So one of the issues was that because I didn't get an allowance and because there was no way for me to earn an allowance, like for example, if I wash my plates, I get 1 ringgit, or maybe I sweep the floor, I get 5 ringgit. I work at my mom's shop, I get 10 ringgit a day or something like that, right? Because that wasn't made available. So learning how to allocate money wasn't there. Because how do you allocate 50 cents? I don't know. I still don't know up to today. I don't think it's possible.
10 cents each. I don't know how much. I mean,
you actually need to, because I get a coin, and then so I think when I was 10, 6, 12, right? Then I got like 5 ringgit a month. Right?
Wow.
So
big upgrade.
Yeah, so it's like 1 ringgit every year, something like that. So like 50 cents, right? You have to split it up. First of all, you need to buy something to split it up.
Correct.
Right? You can't just divide it. It's not digital currency, for example.
So your mom didn't give you like 10 cents in 50 cents. It's just like one coin, 50 cents.
Yeah.
Oh gosh.
Yeah, the 50 cent coins, right? So had to break it, or I had to like, find someone to give me the change and split it up into 10 cents or that. So I think because of that, I think like money allocation, I didn't save up for something that I like, let's say. And so that I think has an effect to an extreme where basically you almost don't have any like wants to a point, which is, of course, it's good for generating excess capital. Because what that means is that even if you have a very small salary, right, but you'll be saving a lot more than, let's say, someone triple or quadruple your salary. In fact, I know this because I have friends who, when they started working, not now of course, but when they started working, it was double my salary, right? For example. But then I would be able to pay a trip for Japan, and they'll be like, no, this year it's tight, right? So then I was like, this is really weird. And I'm not a non-degree holder. But then this person, studied, I'm not going to mention the university, of course, but it's a university in the UK. If I'm, prime ministers have come from those universities.
Okay. You get the
politicians, yeah. So, and I'm wondering, like, these people are like way more formally educated, earning twice my salary. But if I want to go to Japan tomorrow, I can go. Because this is pre-COVID, of course. But, I could do that.
Yeah.
But my friends couldn't, or this particular friend, and then and other friends I will have situations also. So that's the good part. And then the bad part is that I think that because I don't, sometimes ironically you learn more by spending money, right? Like because maybe you want a car, then you know a lot more about cars. You know how like mechanics try to cheat you, for example. Well, first of all, then you need to know how to drive, so you know about geography. You know about car parts. You know how to check if you're buying a second-hand car. You know about to check whether the guy is cheating you on the mileage and things like that. So because I didn't buy all this stuff, and it was just not actually spending the money, so then you actually get deprived of this knowledge. So that's my situation. But I think we need to come back on the motivation. So the motivation is...
it's a good point about that.
Yeah.
And I'm going to relate that because a lot of people are fearful of making that mistakes. Like what you said.
Correct.
Because you didn't go through the experience of buying a car whatsoever, right? It's such a good point because...
Or a house or any other, And
it's related to the motivation part that we're talking about, because people may be motivated to want to get money or grow their wealth, but they are disenfranchised or dismotivated because they are afraid of making that mistakes. It's so hard to earn that money, but then here they are, they're putting that money at jeopardy and at risk.
So there's a pros and cons, right? Because it's a defense-offense game.
Correct.
And defense was built into me at a very young age. And my journey really is about offense, which then leads into investing. Right?
Yes.
Because, apart from actually earning a higher income and all that, investing is part of the sword, right? Of your financial
arsenal.
Journey. Arsenal, right? So what got me interested in investing was because at that point in time, I wasn't working. I'm not going to say my whole story again. You can listen to the first podcast. But basically, I needed to find something that I enjoyed but can make money, which is of course very difficult, right? And a lot of the things that make you a lot of money in the world is incredibly boring, for me at least, right? So like even, I wouldn't say engineering, because engineers don't earn that much also, depending on petroleum engineering, of course.
Different industries.
Yeah, but by and large, if you work in the factory,
engineers don't earn a lot. Yeah.
But by then you go through 4 years of hell and you don't earn a lot. So it's a bit sad, but not as bad as doctors. Okay. But seriously, like even like what are high income jobs, right? A lawyer. I like law, but I don't know if I like to be a lawyer.
Try being a human rights lawyer and tell me about the pay, man.
It was UN and all that. Gone. So lawyer, boring, right? And doctor, you need to be a specialist usually. And even if you want to be a specialist, like, it takes so long for you to study. So what's next? Investment banking. So for me, no, because it's again, it's very high hours. probably won't enjoy it because, there's a lot more politics, more sales type front facing jobs. Not that I'm like bad at it. It's just not
your personality.
Yeah, not my cup of tea, right? So,
yeah.
So investment banking, then finance, ironically, you don't earn them. It's a bit like engineering, right?
Yeah.
On the outside, you think you earn a lot, but like if you're an analyst, not too much.
Actually, when you say that, right, it's like, oh, you work for a bank, you must be rich. You heard this stuff before.
Yeah, I sweep the floors for the bank, So yeah, so I'm like, hey, but then the things that I like, right, that philosophy, politics, history, things like that, we got pay money. Like you must be a professor, then they'll pay you a better tenure professor, so you get basically a pension for life. But that's where investing came into the role, because it was that very thing. And one of the big advantages, now that you mentioned it, in my late teens and early 20s, is that once I learned about investing and money, I realized I leapfrog, right? In terms of the kind of conversations I can have with people.
Yes. So
suddenly
true.
I gain access, right, to words and phrases that I understand, that I can go out and talk to pretty much everyone. And you see the massive leapfrog. And in fact, I would say that thanks to my discovery of investing, there isn't a, how do I put it? There are people like way older than myself who still do not have the same financial maturity.
Oh, I have to agree.
But mostly because maybe they're in a different field,
different
or
industry,
different interests or whatever.
Yeah, different bubble lah.
Yeah, different bubble. So but of course, finance is a very big bubble lah. So I think that was one big motivator. Like, wow, suddenly I could grow up just like that so quickly.
Yes.
So then these were the things. And then of course, at the end of the day is, I mentioned in my podcast with Yamcha sessions actually, which is that your thoughts can have effect on reality.
Oh, yes.
So if you think that electric vehicle is going to do well and Tesla is going to do well, you can buy it and you will know your answer. And I like that element, right, where there is there's cause and effect. And so that's very interesting aspect for me. So these are some of the motivations for investing.
The causal relationship in a way.
Sorry to interrupt this podcast. I know it's a little bit annoying, but I want to tell you something that I think can be really helpful to you. I can tell you're really interested in the stock market and want to learn more about it so that you actually know what you're doing, especially when today things are getting more complex and complicated. That's why we came up with the Stock Investing Blueprint, or SIB. It's our signature e-learning program that teaches you how to pick the right stocks most of the time, buy and sell it at the best possible time, and manage your stock portfolio systematically. It currently has more than 10 hours of content and it's growing. You'll also be part of a group of like-minded investors that can help speed up your learning process. To hop on the program, click on the link in the description or go to learn.firl.co/courses/SIB.
Yeah. So for those of you listening right there, out there right now, I guess COVID-19 and the times we live in are very, very unprecedented. Why I say it's unprecedented? I mean, I didn't live through. I did kind of live through the 96-97 crisis, because I was a technician in a factory. And during the heydays...
But before that, 97 crisis was, or this one was?
Oh, 97, definitely. Okay. hands down, man. And I'll tell you why, because I was in a factory. I was earning probably, let me see, less than 1,000 ringgit.
Okay. But back then it's okay for...
Yeah, it's okay.
Like you're not graduated yet, right?
Correct.
So it's...
Yeah, but what was interesting was that you could see operators in a factory could drive nice cars that were way above their pay grade. Okay. And what happened when the crash happened, all right, when the 97 crash happened and 98 came, a lot of them were so afraid to go back after the shift. And I was like, why? And this is a story I haven't told you before. So here I was, just eager to go back because sometimes we have to do a night shift.
Oh,
Yeah, so
okay.
it's a seven.
Is it paid?
Of course,
Okay.
you get an extra allowance.
Okay,
right?
that's good. Yeah.
Yeah, but what was interesting was that these guys were not keen to go back. It's a very long night shift is very tiring. You just want to go back and sleep. And these guys were not keen to go back. And I found out later why. They were car repossessors at the guardhouse of the factory.
Oh, so why?
Because the company cut all overtime pay. So they were living beyond their means and they were relying on their overtime pay to actually pay their cars. But now because of the crisis...
So no overtime?
No overtime.
No car?
No car. No, at that point still got car. But car repossessor waiting to repossess the car. And that's why they were trying to stay as long as possible in the factory to not meet the car repossessors. So I literally lived through it.
Wow.
Okay. Then the reason why I brought this story up and saying that COVID-19 is unprecedented is a lot of young people, not just young, a lot of even boomers shun the stock market because of the 97, 98 crisis. Because they lost so much money.
Yeah.
And because of that, they advise their children not to come into the stock market. It's all gambling and it's all that. So there's this thing called a lost generation in a way, right? But now what we're seeing is that you're seeing young people coming back and more retail participation coming back into the market. But at the same time, what are the similarities? Again, you see young people who do not, in a way, are a little bit ill-equipped, a little bit enthusiastic. I think the word that Robert Schiller used to use, irrational exuberance. Irrational exuberance. So you're seeing that same thing, just in a different mode.
Mm-hmm.
And what this crisis has actually shown me and reinforced is that people don't prepare themselves well. And linking that to the motivation is that everybody wants that money, that wealth creation, but they're unlikely to be prepared for two reasons. One is they don't want to put in the work, but also ironically they don't know how to. And I think
knowledge, right?
The knowledge, and I think with the proliferation of social media today, it's not knowledge. It's Booster bets. Yes, there's tons of data. I would say data. I said there are tons of opinions. But then, how does someone distill all this into knowledge form, applicable knowledge form? And I think that's probably one of the non-motivating reasons for a lot of people not to start, because they're just overwhelmed. Either overwhelmed or on the other side of the camp, greedy, shoot first thing later. You only live once kind of thing. So I don't know. What are your thoughts?
Well, I mean, so there is a very interesting stat, right, that showed in the US, there's always so there are many types of crashes, okay? Some are economic crashes, some are valuation or like there's a huge bubble, right? Kind of crash. So when it comes to especially technology related one, it's very accurate. It's 40 years.
Oh.
So in the US, you can call it the first tech type of crash was the automobile. Because it was the tech back in the day. So this was in the 20s. And then in the 60s, they had the Tronics crash. So any company with a Tronics or a Tron, right? So that's where your semiconductors are. Because in the 60s, that's where Intel and all that started
that was the in thing,
come
man.
to life.
Yeah.
Yes. So then after that, in the 60s, then the 2000, it was the internet bubble.
The 2000s, yes.
Correct.
Yeah.
So why is it that there is this 40-year gap between each of these? The reason is because it requires the old generation to stop investing in the stock market.
So one cycle
Correct.
is done.
One generation.
One generation, sorry.
Right? Because in between 40 years, there are many cycles, but the generational cycle, I guess. So because it needs all the old guys to get out so that a new bubble can come up.
Shift change.
Correct.
Crew change. Yeah.
Correct.
Crew change, yeah.
So if you use that same logic does it apply? We're only 21 years since
yeah,
since the what?
since the
Right.
2008, 1998.
Yeah. So if you ask me, I think today in terms of the bubble, it's a little bit more back with fundamentals.
Oh,
Like even
yeah, I
like
agree.
Tesla, right? Yeah, probably it's overvalued, but it's not overvalued like Cisco back in the
In
day.
the days, yeah.
Like Cisco, I can't remember the exact stats, right? They were trading at like 40 times sales, something like that. But Tesla is trading like 20 something times sales. Cisco is a lot worse. And then there are a lot of companies IPOing with like no business models, basically. So I wouldn't say that, but that doesn't mean that that is not overvalued. And I think the interesting thing is that a company can stay overvalued for a very long time. And so one of the things in going back to our topic about phases, right,
Yeah.
is that you will come to realize when you get the knowledge there. I know I'm skipping a few steps, but basically when you get the knowledge about discovering undervalued, overvalued stocks.
Valuations of companies.
Correct. So that's the fundamental, the theoretical part about analysis, which is true, right? But the practical aspect of investing is also expectations and psychology. And trust me, a lot of companies can stay overvalued for a very, very long time before they drop down.
Realities catch up.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So that's why, so that will be a more advanced phase, I would guess, when it comes to investing. But let's go back to the knowledge phase, right? I think the whole issue, and my personal view is that ironically, and it's very sad, right? You actually need speculators and people who are uneducated to be in the stock market to make money. Because it is uneducated and speculative people that push prices way above or way below where they should be.
Correct.
And so
volatility, they do need to create a volatility. If not, there's no opportunity for
that's
you.
right. That's right.
Yeah.
So that's why you need to be the rational investor. And that will be the next phase, is to actually get a rational, a logical framework to actually understand what is crazy and what is not.
Yes.
Right?
So you start off with the motivation, then you start off with some kind of frame, not to say framework, some kind of probably knowing your surroundings about investing, knowing what is the universe like, what are the options available. Then you come to a point where you want to know, okay, this seems like something up my cup of tea.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then you decide, okay, if I want to dive a little bit deeper and I want to further improve myself on getting better at this, I think maybe we relate with our own personal stories.
Yeah.
And I can start with mine, with my wilderness when I started with, I ironically started with unit trust first. Because that was an option that was...
Ironically or unfortunately?
I think I would say unfortunately.
Okay.
I had money, but I was busy. I was so excited in my career that I was just said, okay, I'll just abdicate my responsibility.
Actually, before that, I think your story is very good at that point, right? Because one thing I realized, and we get, because now we are online and we get like questions all the time, email or Instagram, whatever, Facebook.
Yeah.
And people actually ask, like 16-year-old guys, asking us like, hey, I want to invest. What's my first step? And I would say actually that your first step should be to get an income. And perhaps in your case, the best option was to actually not invest, precisely because you cannot put in effort to learn how to manage, right? Because you were telling me you started off with, well, first properties and then unit trust, right?
Yes.
Both of which didn't do too well for you.
Yes, it didn't do too well for me.
In fact, the best asset that you invested in was yourself.
Yes.
And that's why you had that, you had a lot of income, right, working at your job. So that was actually the best thing. And so that's one of the things I think you want to realize as an investor, especially if you are a fresh grad or you just started working a few years, is that, quite frankly, it's okay to not invest. I know people talk about compound interest and then you have to start first and all that. But in fact, you're far better off to, okay, here's what I will do. I will actually focus on generating more income, right? And then take a portion of that and then focus it on maybe one asset class.
Yes.
Right, max two, but just start with one.
Correct.
Stocks, whatever. And then you just start small, right? Maybe 10, 20% of your net worth. The rest can be in cash. That's no problem.
Correct.
So, but you start and then you learn to a point where that you have so much capital because you're so good at your job that you can choose to retire or you can choose to quit your job and then focus fully on investing.
Ironically, that early part of that 10% that you mentioned just now is similar to the part where you said you have to go through the experience of buying a car.
Yes.
That is, if I look back right now in hindsight, right, and that was actually tuition fees.
Yeah.
Literally tuition fees, because if I didn't go through, I know a lot of us read, Warren Buffett started investing at 11 or that kind of thing. If you read in between the lines, he paid a lot of tuition fees.
Yeah.
He bought Capital Cities at 40, and then he sold it at 45 or something, and he made like 10, 20%. Yeah, because of the war. Those are the things that a lot of investors think they can shortcut, which you can't. You need to be able to overcome allowing yourself to go through that phase. And going through that phase doesn't necessarily mean I know we've talked about being focused on one asset class. There's no harm diversifying in the beginning to explore. Then you realize that, this is not my cup of tea. And that was the mistake I made. I went unit trust, I went properties, then I went into stocks thinking I could get quick money, and I got burned really nicely. Then I realized, okay, time to go on a diet, which was the next phase. Time to go on a diet. And then time to know, also realization that, my gosh, if you don't focus, you're everywhere. You are like literally the jack of all trades, but a master of none. And I wasn't really enjoying it, because here I was, when I was dabbling into unit trust, I was talking, and I was recruited as correction. I was not recruited. I was so eager to learn. I went looking for my unit trust upline.
Ayo.
Yeah. Seriously.
Okay, here's a pro. If you guys are a unit trust agent, or if you're friends with unit trust and you think that, your upline or the agent is an expert, you have to realize he is an expert.
Yeah.
Not in managing funds, not in the stocks within the funds or that. He's an expert in selling the fund.
Spot on.
You have to understand that.
Yeah. And my struggle was that when I was asking him about, when I was reading all this fund structures and all that kind of thing, I couldn't get reliable answers. And that's why they are experts at selling the fund. They are experts at how to give confidence and convince people to actually buy. That's their skill, right?
Yeah.
And looking back at all that tuition fees was well worth it, because you don't just learn about the intricacies of each asset class.
That's right.
You also learn about your emotion with money.
Yeah,
your emotion with money, your emotion with how different as the limitations of each asset class, the nuances. Like, for example, I remember this very, very well, and it's someone we want to bring to our podcast as well, Amanda from FIRL. So I bought a property in Johor, and there was some problems with the agreements. Okay, agreements.
Like the tenancy agreement?
No, it was the S&P.
S&P, okay,
S&P.
okay.
And what happened? I was in the Philippines. I was so busy. I just moved to KL. I was so busy. And she literally gave me a good dressing down, because it says, how can you let it slip? Because I was just pushing it off, and the deadline was due. And because of that, I was almost charged a penalty by the owner. Sorry, it wasn't my property in Johor. It was my own property in KL. I was almost to the point where the owner wanted to penalize me because I did not get the paperwork in order for the transfer of the title and the S&P.
So how much would that have cost you? I mean,
a few thousand.
Man.
Yeah.
I think you raised a great point, right? Which is that, maybe this specific to property is that it's actually not very useful, good investment for working it out.
Oh yeah, I was in the Philippines. I couldn't go to my lawyer's office. I couldn't assign someone. Amanda at that time was in Johor. My wife didn't know nuts about all this, and I don't blame her. And she had a kid, and I was like, I was angry at two things. One is I let it slip. Two, I was embarrassed but angry that she gave me a dressing down. But it was a very good dressing down. It was like, so it was really a wake up call. After that, I said, screw this. normal properties. That was the point when I said, screw this, really, normal properties.
Yeah, and then you had like what? Yeah, excluding your residential house, you had 4.
Yeah, no,
3.
Including my residential, I had 4.
So 3 investment properties,
That's right.
basically.
That's right. I was at
That's 3. But you got some people who want to have 15 or 20 in 5 years or something.
good luck, man. I mean, if you can appoint a good agent or you have a good ecosystem to manage it, probably. But for me, it was a very, very lonely journey, man.
Man.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think before we wrap up the podcast, right?
Yeah.
I think there are 3 big stages, that we all face. One is you don't have the right motivation, or you don't have any motivation for that matter.
Yeah.
And then of course, no right motivation.
Yeah.
Then after that, you don't have the knowledge. Okay, so that's phase 2.
Yeah.
And then when you get the knowledge here, move on to phase 3, you realize that some of the things that you learn in the theory and the knowledge, not 100% accurate. Like your example of the house, you were probably interested because you have already calculated the rental yield.
Oh yeah, capital gains.
All that you have calculated. But then you maybe did not factor in this specific example that you just mentioned about, right?
Yeah.
So I think those are the 3 big phases. Or is there any other phases you'd like to add?
I think the last one probably will be something both you and I are trying to go through and trying to elevate ourselves to a point where what are the skills that people who are great at managing money, guys like hedge fund managers and all that, but do it with...
Wait, not all hedge fund.
Not all, okay, true.
Not Maven Capital.
Not Maven. But do it with scarcity in tools and resources.
Yeah.
Because let's face reality, guys. These guys got Bloomberg terminals, access to data that we can't pay for as retail investors. But doing that at the same time, are we happy and practical about the results we want to achieve with the scarcity of resources that we have? I think that's where stage 4 or even 5, because that is something of an ever, what do you call it? You never hit your goal. It's just an ever improvement kind of thing that you get better and better and better and better, and you just enjoy it.
I think that is a very good point, because one of the things that we learned from this really good author and speaker, Simon Sinek. Right? He introduced a lot of other things, right? From the why, what, how to whatever.
Start with why.
Yeah, start with why, right? I think one of the best ones is this idea of infinite game. Now, this is very important. I'll tell you why. And why this phase 4 is important.
Yeah.
If you ever intend to reach this level, because once you have the knowledge, once you have the practical skills, right? What ends up happening is that you start to compare and you start to so think of it as I'll explain it this way. So phase 1 brings you from the 90%.
Zero.
Maybe the most people have a motivation to make money. So maybe the 50% who have no motivation to make money to the 50% who has the motivation. Then phase 2 brings you from that 50% to the 10% who have the knowledge. So then the 10%, then you move on maybe to the 5%, or maybe the 1%, right? Who has the knowledge and has the practical experience.
Yeah.
So when you go from the 1% to the 0.1%, that's where some of these more deeper psychological things that you need to take note of. One of them is that comparison starts to creep in, right? Because then you already have the ego that you can actually do it, that you have done it probably.
Yep.
And now you're going for the mountaintop, right?
You want to be the tiger.
Yes. And as it goes, the problem with the mountaintop is sometimes it's very suffocating. The air is very thin there. And because a lot, and that suffocation, a lot of it is self-sabotage as well, because you are always comparing and comparing. You're always comparing, okay, this year I make 15%. How about the other guy? Oh, yo, 17%, So then you start to be emotional about it. Then you're like, okay, then I need to make higher returns. Okay, so if next year I get 15%, how can I get that more than that?
Yeah.
Or maybe I have to go for more risky stocks. Maybe I have to break my risk management rules. Maybe I have to take margin and things like that.
Yes.
And so you start, you went from idiot to smart back to idiot, but in a different way.
Reverse way.
Yeah, you're a different kind of idiot. You're a smart idiot, right? Which is actually a lot worse, right?
Yeah.
So
Because that's where the ego and everything creeps in.
Yeah, exactly. And so, coming back to Simon Sinek, I think the best thing he has taught me so far is that business and investing is an infinite game.
Yeah.
Right?
Play the long game.
Even if you lose to this other guy for the 3 years, or you have not beaten the index for 3 years, that doesn't mean that it is wrong. Because do you know that the stocks, so for a lot of investors out there, especially value investors, right, they spend, I think, half their time in the top 25%, in the bottom 25% percentile, the bottom quartile of investors.
Yes.
Over the year. So you can imagine half the time you are like close to last,
You're in the trenches.
But overall your results are good.
Yeah.
And so the only way you can withstand bad periods of underperformance, and again, this is obviously for phase 4 investors, let's call it, who have invested maybe, 4, 5, 6 years.
6 years or probably even 10 years, yeah.
What you have to realize is that underperformance is part of the game.
Yeah.
Of course, you would like to be someone like Warren Buffett, right, who have no down years when he was managing a fund back in the day, and always beating market.
Yeah.
But the reality is, most even good or great investors, they trail the market sometimes, and so the only way for you to say that is okay, I'm okay with not beating the market, is that it is an infinite game, right? I have time until I die.
Yeah.
And this is also important because what happens is that when you're trailing the market, you are more, maybe you have gotten closer to becoming a better investor and you're close to getting good returns, but then you start to say things like, might as well, if I've been trailing the index for 3 years, let's say, might as well just buy the index.
Yeah.
Right? You say things like that. It sure creeps into your mind, right?
Yeah.
Or even if you like slightly beat only, but you're like, hey, I have to work so hard just to.
But then you see another guy who may not be, in your mind may not be as smart, may not be, and then suddenly make killing, especially during COVID. I mean, it's a psychological game, and a lot of people, while they logically understand, or there's so many times it's been talked about that money is not a intelligent game. It's very hard.
And then they say things like it's luck. It's all about luck. Yeah. It's all about whether you go at a good time or whatever. You're a statistical outlier. And I don't think that's necessarily true. I do think that just like in business or in sports or whatever, I think that it's what you tell yourself, the story you tell yourself that will enable you to essentially breeze through or at least survive the bad times. Because once you can survive that, then you're only left with the upside to take care of everything, right?
Correct.
So I think that is a phase 4 thing, which we are obviously trying to improve as well.
That's right.
So any final words before we close
No,
the
I think
podcast?
don't be afraid to go through the phases, and sometimes going back into a previous phase can actually help you jump or leap further into the next phase.
Yeah.
So don't worry about taking one step back to leap two steps forward. So I think those will be my final words.
All right, that's it for this podcast. Catch us on our next one.
Right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.